Hi, this is Karan from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles, and welcome to Movies That Shaped Us, a journey of self-discovery through a shared love of film. We are two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. We hope you find these movies and topics as fun as revelatory to you as they've been to us. So, Karan, why don't you talk to our listeners about what we'll be discussing today?
Yeah, so our topic for today is movies that shaped our relationship with our fathers. This is our Father's Day episode. So, yeah, I can sort of get into a little bit of how I put this together. But I guess before I get to that, just a little bit of context and intro on my dad. So my dad was a general in the army. He spent most of his life in the army. We grew up as army brats, moving all over the country, India, where I grew up with him. My dad, and we'll explore this as I go through my movies, and you actually met him, so you have some context.
I did, yes. Yes, I do.
He is definitely my idol, in so many ways. He's a brilliant person, a very loving father, a very talented person, very much into music and singing and all the things, even though we've made fun of him our whole lives. And because of that, he stopped singing, but he's been huge influence. I know. He's been a huge influence in my life. So much of who I am, whatever little bit of success and such I've achieved in my life, I feel like I owe it to him, my work ethic or how I carry myself. Obviously I don't think I'll ever reach him because he's just at a different level in my eyes. But yeah, I love him dearly and he's been an idol to me, like I said. But in terms of kind of the list today, I sort of thinking about aspects of my dad, that I care about and think of when I think of him. And then I found movies and characters that sort of replicated or spoke to those similar traits. So that's sort of how I put my list together. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, so very similar. Not in terms of the actual person. Like my dad was not in the army, but I viewed him in a lot of the same ways that you did too. So he, was also a great father. Worked in government for a little bit early on in his career, but then got into the private sector. In business, running a lot of really successful companies. So I definitely, looked up to him there in terms of work ethic and, in terms of what I wanted to accomplish in my career and how I viewed my success was definitely measured against his for sure. But, he also was someone who was important in instilling, values and morals and ethics into me as a kid. That was definitely something that he did a very good job, I think, of just instilling in me. And he was also, very, very busy all the time with business, but was very good at spending the time that he needed as a father. Like he'd be at my soccer games and my, singing recitals and things like that. So it wasn't something where he worked so hard he was an absent father. I think he impressively was able to do both. You'll get, you see this, I think, in a lot of the different movies that I'll talk about today as well. Similar sort of framework, thinking about how, I view my father and our relationship, and then thinking about those, classic films that have dealt with these similar themes and which ones really resonated in me even back then. Maybe I didn't even know it when I was watching these movies for the first time, but for sure, looking back as I got older, I definitely really felt that, these are the movies that best represented, our relationship and my view of fatherhood in many different ways. So
that sounds great. By the way, singing recitals, this is the first time I'm hearing about this in all these years that I've known you.
Yeah, I sang in high school. I was in an a cappella group. I might have even referenced it in a previous episode where we did a European tour, but yeah, I sang for a long time. So similar, I guess, to your dad, I also like to sing.
Why have I never heard you sing? Well, I feel like we need to fix this.
We'll got to do K-Town karaoke when you come down to LA next time. I'll be happy to sing for you. I won't sing on the episode, so don't build it up to our listeners too much. Though maybe at one point we'll have an episode around movies that gave us our voice or something, literally, and right. maybe I'll sing then, but it won't be today.
That sounds great. I mean, I sang too, as you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So, okay. Well.
Great. So why don't we jump into the movies then? I'll start with my number three. My number three movie that shaped my relationship with my dad was To Kill a Mockingbird from 1962. So this film, directed by Robert Mulligan, starring Gregory Peck, John Menga, Frank Overton, and Robert Duvall. The IMDb plot: Atticus Finch, a widowed lawyer in Depression-era Alabama, defends a Black man against an undeserved rape charge and his children against prejudice. So for me, I think this movie, exemplifies the ideal father figure. This is a father who teaches your children really what is right and what is wrong, like instilling in the children a moral code and a sense of ethics. And these are really things as a child too that are important to learn. Like you want to know what's right and wrong before then going through life and kind of experiencing those things and learning it as you go. I mean, this is definitely something I think is really important as parents to instill in your children. And it's definitely something that I felt the same from my father, especially this I also don't think is something in terms of a dad's quote unquote job that is different from sons or daughters. I mean, this is something that in this movie he has both a son and a daughter, but it's the main child is really his daughter. And that is sort of what we sort of see the lens of how she views this character. So in this film he really is the ideal father. He sacrifices himself. They said in the plot summary, he's a widower, so there is no mother involved. Like he has to bear that burden as well. And he dives himself into his work as a lawyer. And that is something not only that he doesn't do it for money, because most of the cases that he takes on are from poor people, farmers. Like he's really in this to protect the little guy. And those that have been wronged. And Scout, who's the daughter, definitely sees this in him. He stands up for what's right, helping her then do the same. Like I said, like he's not in it for the money. So this is not like his family is well off, even though he is like a big lawyer in the town. And he is, sacrifices then all of his free time to his children. Like when he's not working, he's there, being a parent and teaching his kids these things. And what I think too is just interesting to see in this film too is the main plot as we talked about in the summary is defending this Black man against rape charges, and he's the defense attorney. He tries to basically protect this man from the lynch mob that's out to get him, takes the case on, and he actually loses. And this, I think, is important too, to show that, just because you're an ideal person, ideal father, like you're not always going to win. You're not a Superman. Right. Even though, again, I think, with his kids, like they later on in the film, you can see how they learn from him in terms of those moral and ethics. But I think it's really important to see failure in your father, that even though he stood up for what is right, sometimes right does not always win. I think just Gregory Peck too is absolutely perfect in this role of just embodying like the perfect idealized father, but not too perfect to be unbelievable. This is not some quote unquote movie, right, of like a perfect person. You definitely see his flaws there. So I think this movie for me really does show how you can idealize and idolize your father, see the flaws in him, but then also that his job is really to help give you those ethics and show you what is right and wrong, and not only just tell you that, but to demonstrate it in actions. Like Atticus obviously tells his kids that what is important and that racism is bad and these things, but it's really from them seeing him stand up to the racism of the town is what is that example for the kids. So I had to include this one on my list.
Yeah, this is a special one. I agree with everything you said. I've seen it many times before. I actually saw the play that was put up in New York in 2019, 2020. I didn't see the Jeff Daniels version, but I saw the Harris version, which was really special to kind of just be with these people in sort of flesh and blood. The thing that struck me the most actually watching this movie again in preparation for this was just the quieter moments when he's sitting with the kids and whether it's a story time or some sort of lesson is being imparted or just a casual moments between them. I just found that, I mean, we're talking such a long time ago and not what you typically associate with a father to be doing. And I know he's put in this position because there is no mother,
right?
But even so, I don't know, one is sort of meant to believe that the dad is always the one who's taking care of the outside world, the breadwinner and such, and not the nurturing figure. And it's really amazing to see how this character does both, so. And for whatever reason, in my past viewings, I'd latched on more to the court case and to do the
Mm-hmm.
right thing and the morality and the ethics of it. But this time, what struck me more was just his home life, how good he is with his kids and just the life they share. And you see that in the kids too, how free and kind of uninhibited they feel at the
Oh
same
yeah.
time. Yeah, especially the girl, which again, maybe this is stereotyping, generalizing, but I always think that, oh, a girl child from that time probably wouldn't be that free.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows how true that is, or no, we weren't alive then. But the fact that Scout is in her little dungarees,
Right.
jumping around, what have you, it's kind of amazing, So I don't know, that made me really happy to see.
Yeah, no, I mean he's very strong in the film in terms of standing up for what's right, but also
Mhm.
very gentle with the
Very
kids. Like you
tender,
said,
yeah.
he's not like a strict authority father figure. He's able to kind of play that mother and father role in a way,
Yeah.
in the traditional, archetypal sense, to his kids, because there is no mom. He's kind of forced into that. But yeah, again, that's why I think he's just such an idealized version of what all fathers probably strive to be able to do, be successful and strong and in your professional career, but then at the same time be there for your kids when they need it.
Yeah. And like you said, lead by showing them. And that's not just about the big things in life, it's about the small things in life too. I feel like the
Right.
kids are really empowered to kind of make their own choices and, be accountable for them. And what he's providing them is a bit of a roadmap or, okay, here's how it is. Let me tell you. And now it's up to you. You make choices.
Right.
And and feel the responsibility of it all. So I thought that was very good to watch and yeah, very
Yeah.
relevant.
Totally. It still works really well. I think this movie,
Mhm.
based on a great book too. I loved the
Yeah,
book when I read it in school, but the film I think just holds up just as well in terms of a timeless classic in a lot of ways, but especially in how it represents fatherhood and what fathers can do.
totally agree. Okay, so my number three, a movie that couldn't be more different,
Mm-hmm.
is the Pink Panther from 2006.
Mm-hmm.
The quick log line on this is: bumbling Inspector Clouseau must solve the murder of a famous soccer coach and find out who stole the infamous Pink Panther diamond. Directed by Sean Levy, starring Steve Martin, Kevin Kline, and Beyonce, and many other people as well. So I put this movie in firstly just because Steve Martin is such a big hit in my
Mm-hmm.
household, and we've talked about this before.
Oh
And
yeah.
whenever I think of my dad, and there are many things that come to my mind, but the one thing that also comes to my mind is sort of him just laughing out loud. And I think this is one of those movies is so ridiculous
Yeah.
that it's sort of, well, for whatever reason, it makes him laugh so much. Most Steve Martin movies do, but I think this is at the top of that list. And I just have such fond memories of sitting with him and us as a family and just watching this movie and then over and over again, and him reciting lines from the movie.
Oh wow.
After that, all the gags and what have you for days to come, we still do that. So it holds like a special place in my heart in that sense. But as I watched this movie over and over again and grown up sort of with it a little bit, a couple of things come to mind. One, I think Steve Martin sort of in his real life, not that I know the person, kind of represents in my mind a bit of an ideal dad,
Mm,
who's just smart and witty and funny, but at the same time kind of goofy and silly, talented, but is not hiding his talent, but is also not wearing it on his sleeve.
right.
Like
Definitely
there's
not
sort of a
arrogant.
coolness to him in that
Mhm.
regard. And that's why he is who he is. So I think there's a little bit of that meta-ness that kind of comes with it. But then you look at this character of Jacques Clouseau, I think it represents this side of my dad, which is a little bit goofy, sometimes a little bit overconfident to make a decision, you know, before thinking through everything. It doesn't happen very often, but there are moments like that. And then, hilarity ensues after, and it's a lot of fodder for me and my sister and my mom to make fun of him, especially for somebody who's so put together as a general, always makes the right decision. We all look up to him for that.
Uh-huh.
But there are many, many moments where that doesn't happen. And I don't know, there's something about this character that makes me think of that. And yeah, you know, as much as, like you said, we look up to our dads, I think as I've grown older, looking up to somebody is not just about looking up to them for all the right things that they do.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to be said about just the silliness or the bad calls or the flaws that people have. And it's not just to learn from, but there's something vulnerable and sweet about that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
after all, our parents and our fathers, no matter what pedestal we put them on, they're also human
Right.
at the end of the day, you
Right.
know? And as much as my dad can take life and us and doing the right thing seriously, I think it's important that he can laugh at himself and laugh at us, and we can all laugh together as well. So I don't know, this movie, though it's totally ridiculous and silly, I think it represents that for me. Obviously beautifully cast. I think Kevin Kline and Steve Martin are amazing.
Great chemistry.
Great chemistry. The French actor whose name I'm forgetting, who's
Jean Reno.
Jean Reno,
Yeah.
also incredible. Their dynamic is so amazing. I've watched the original Pink Panther movies too, which, you know, are of a different brand, where he's singing 60s and what have you. But I don't know, there's something very sweet and silly about this version, thanks to Steve Martin and the cast. And you're in France. I would never complain about that. So, you know, it's a great ride. So yeah, that's my number 3, Pink Panther.
Yeah. This is a film actually I'd never seen. So just to talk about the 60s one. So, and my dad actually, which maybe I should have mentioned this in the intro, like he, as folks who maybe have listened to this podcast a lot, have heard me make reference to my dad sort of telling me to watch something, an older film, because it's sort of a classic and I should see it. Peter Sellers and those original Pink Panther films were definitely that too. Like he was like, oh, these are comedy classics, watch these. And I watched them as a kid and thought they were really funny and got into Sellers, definitely thanks to him. And I had never seen this movie just because, even though I love Steve Martin, I was like, they can't remake the Pink Panther. I'm not gonna watch this. And I was very pleasantly surprised to how well, especially Steve Martin did, is sort of capturing that like arrogant stupidity of what Clouseau and what Sellers does. Like he thinks he knows what he's doing, even though he doesn't, but it's like this, he's putting on an air of like, oh, I know what I'm doing. So it's sort of an innocent arrogance. It's hard to kind of describe it, but Sellers did such a good job at doing that. And that's what I think made those movies so successful for decades. And I think Martin taps into it and brings his own kind of persona into this role and makes it his own. But at the same time, it feels like Sellers in a way. I thought it was, you know, Kevin Kline, like you said, was great. Playing the, you know, a critical role too of like the chief, who they're always like kind of going some good banter back and forth. They have great chemistry. And yeah, the plot was, you know, a nice homage to the original with the diamond, but still was very interesting. And I loved the kind of the twist at the end, because you think Clouseau is dumb. Like he's always messing up. He's like, oh, I know how to, I'm the best at everything. Oh yeah. Oh, I know Chinese, like blah, blah, blah. And you're just sort of like, okay, this guy's a fool. And then the plot twist at the end, when like he actually did know Chinese and that actually helps him solve the whole case. I was like, oh, this is great. Like the movie is letting him be a hero in a way that fits into his character. And I just thought that was like hilarious, a funny twist that also was like great, like just in terms of the plot.
Kind of brilliant. Yeah.
It really was.
Brings me back to my dad too. Like even the moments where I've laughed at him later on, I was like, you probably were saying the right thing. I was the silly one.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I thought that was great. I mean, you know, some of not every single joke lands. I think the majority of them still do. I think the one weak link was probably Beyonce. Like she tried to be an actress for a while. She was in Gold Member, I think was her first role, the Austin Powers 3 film, which I remember not really liking the film overall and thought she was definitely a weak link. And I doubt she really improved much in this, honestly. Maybe that's why she decided to stick with music. But, you know, overall, like I definitely recommend this this film.
She's not there, you know, a whole lot much.
No.
In some ways, the acting aside, but her personal, you know, real life aura actually lends itself to this movie from, you know, all this time ago in like a different way. Like she doesn't have to do much. She walks on the stage, you know, this person is important and means something. And you can see the world going gaga, and also you would never be suspicious of her because she's sort of become this, light of good or what have you. So I thought that was kind of interesting
That's
because when I
true.
first watched it, I didn't even really know who she was
Hmm.
much. But so that I thought that was an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely, if people haven't seen this movie or were like, how can they remake a classic? I'm not going to watch it. I'll watch it. Like I was pleasantly surprised at how good this was. Have you seen the second one? I
Do not watch it.
okay. That's what I've heard, and I didn't know if now I should, so I won't then.
I mean, you can watch it honestly on like a Saturday afternoon if you have
Uh-huh.
nothing else to do. You would not be bored, but it just gets stupider. And
Okay.
this movie, like we've said, does like a great job of sort of balancing the stupidity with wit and smarts. It
Hmm.
doesn't feel like there's a very thin line, and I think that other movie sort of tips to the other side. Still entertaining because
Hmm.
who doesn't want to watch Steve Martin? Of
Right.
course, I would
Right.
watch him in anything, but
Hmm.
not the same.
Okay, that's good to know. But yeah, definitely recommend folks check this out. If they're fans of the original, if they've never seen the original, if they like or even don't like Steve Martin, I think it's a very fun and
I think so
breezy and
too.
entertaining movie to check out.
Yeah. I mean, the hamburger scene, oh my gosh.
Very funny.
Very funny. Okay. What's your number two?
Great. So my number two film that shaped my relationship with my father is The Lion King from 1994. This film's directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff, starring the voices of Jeremy Irons, James Earl Jones, Matthew Broderick, Rowan Atkinson, among others. The plot summary for those who have not seen or heard of this film, if there are any out there, Lion Prince Simba and his father are targeted by his bitter uncle who wants to ascend the throne himself. So this is a film that I feel does a very good job of, I mean, not to get too heady or anything like that, but the whole Freudian concept of, the son standing in the shadow of the father who then has to replace the father. And, that's part, I don't know a lot about Freud or what the theory is called. But there is this whole notion that, the son doesn't really become a man until he's able to replace the father. And I think what this movie does such a good job is really showing that entire arc, as a son, Simba, is standing in his father's shadow. Mufasa is this amazing king. Everyone loves him. I think Simba is, feeling like, oh, I can never live up to what the standard that Mufasa has set in the kingdom to being like the best king ever. But he knows at some point he's going to have to be king.
Right.
Mufasa actually does a very good job. Speaking actually of the Atticus Finch that we talked about earlier, in terms of being a strong but loving father, and these moments where in this earlier scene where Simba, is a kind of bad kid and he messes up and fools around, gets in trouble. And Mufasa takes him aside, and instead of, scolding him or punishing him, he uses this as a teaching moment, reminding him, okay, your disobedience actually puts you in danger, which is, I love you. I don't want you to get hurt. And this sort of way of like being a father through strength, but you love at the same time. I think this
Mhm.
scene is a perfect encapsulation to that. And Mufasa, similar to Atticus Finch, I think, is able to walk that line of you're the king, you're powerful, but at the same time, you do love your kids, and you're able to express that to them in these key moments and teaching them. And then when there's Simba, I'm sorry, not Simba, Mufasa gets killed. So it follows a similar plot of Hamlet in the sense of like his
Right.
brother killing him, right? Simba, runs away, and then he spends this whole period of the film where he's sort of like disregarding all his lessons of his father. He's, Hakuna Matataing around with his buddies. Like, it's sort of like some kid in his 20s or something like that, being like, oh, I don't want any responsibilities. I'm carefree now. This is what life really is. And then, he's kind of running away from this responsibility of actually having to, replace his father. And then, there's the very key moment when he runs into Rafiki and really makes him, who's like the court, I guess, advisor. He's a
Mhm.
monkey, and makes Simba just be like, hey, look, like you have responsibilities, you're running away from them. Like, think back to your father. And then Mufasa appears in the sky, and there's this key moment where, you've forgotten who you are, therefore you've forgotten me. Like, the best parts of the son are really instilled in him by the father. And if you run away from that, if you run away from your father and what, the guidance and the standards that he sets for you, you're really betraying yourself in the end. And that's what gives Simba the strength then to go back, defeat his uncle, become that king, step into that role of his father, and continue on. There's also a big plot thread in this movie too about the legacy. There's, you look up at the stars, those are all the former kings kind of thing. And you're part of this line, you're part of this, lineage, which, is definitely something too. You can feel just, I mean, you don't have to be a son of a king, but, there is a history that every family has. And then you're just another link in that chain. And then at the end of the movie, like he does become his father. Is a whole scene, the circle of life scene, where it's literally mirrored the same as the beginning, where Simba was the child. Now Simba's the father, with his new, son, the next heir to the throne, and really just showing that, there is a circle of life in life, but also with, fathers and sons, that is a cyclical thing too. You step into that role, you replace the father, and then, you are able to, become the man that, your father helped you become. And I think this is very separate than like the Atticus Finch, I think that's a father can have that relationship with sons and daughters. Like obviously Scout was a daughter in that film, but this movie is definitely more about fathers and sons. Like I'm not a woman, I'm not a daughter, but I feel like this concept of replacing the father and holding yourself up to those standards is, I don't think, something that is so common with women. As a film, actually, when I saw this as a kid, I wasn't really that into it. Like I was a huge Disney Renaissance fan. Like I loved Disney, I loved all those films. I felt this was the first one that I was a little disappointed in when I saw it as a kid. Though I saw it like 3 times in the theater, but maybe it was just I was getting a little old. Was starting to realize like, okay, maybe these movies aren't for me, or maybe it was something about the film. I think the music is good, but not as good as what was done before. So, music is very important to me in musicals, and I felt this is a bit of a step down. But in the years since then, this film, especially these themes, because this is something I wasn't thinking about too, as a 10-year-old, in terms of fathers and sons, and really this whole concept of, being in the father's shadow and feeling that pressure, but yet having to overcome that. It was something that I sort of came to later in life. And as I go back and rewatch this film, it just gets better to me. And actually seeing it as well in IMAX, it was a re-release, I think about 10 years ago. Just the scope of this movie. I mean, I think the first 2-3 minutes, the whole circle of life scene is one of my favorite sequences in all of animation. I mean, it just like, it moves me just even thinking about it. And seeing it on an IMAX was incredible. So this movie has changed, with my relationship with this movie has changed as I've sort of been thinking about these larger things, and, the son and the father, just these themes really came out and spoke to me. So I had to, discuss this film. It's definitely something, again, that I've felt like I talked about in the intro of, my father being a sort of how I measure my success in my life against, what he was able to accomplish. So it's a fantastic film. Don't watch the remake if anyone hasn't seen it. The Favreau film is unwatchable, but this is a classic that I still think really holds up.
Yeah, great choice. So it's interesting. I feel like my relationship with this movie is maybe a little bit opposite to yours. Like I watched it when it came out, and I remember loving it. I remember watching it with my parents, and I distinctly remember my mom finally embracing animated movies in a big way because of this movie.
Oh, interesting.
And sort of saying that, oh yeah, we were all in tears, moved completely. I obviously, the larger themes of what you were alluding to, I don't think I got all of it, but just a simple fact of losing your father who you love so much, and then sort of finding your way back in, that was enough. And then after that first viewing, I never watched this movie again until a week ago.
Oh, wow.
I just was, I don't know. I found this movie so weighty and heavy from that childhood experience that I just was like, you know what? I don't have to go back and kind of relive that moment ever again. At least in my teenage years and such. And then as I grew older, I feel like the movie has become such a meme, right? With all these images of holding Simba.
And, oh yeah, that's true.
And the stars,
the
and
ballparks,
yeah, all of that I sort of feel like, oh, this movie has never left the culture. And even though I had not seen the movie, you just feel like you're always watching the movie because it's so memeified. So that was another reason to never go back and look at it. So I was happy to go and watch it again for this. The beginning opening scene, like you said, is like incredible. I could just watch that on repeat. It moved me. Just the whole thing, just watching Mufasa and his wife, just like looking at the child with this much love and hope and everything. I just find that so moving, and their relationship with each other, and then with the child, and all of that is incredible. I will say though, I struggled to stay engaged with the movie as the movie went on. And I think it's because it's so memeified that I just know what's going to happen and what it's all about, that I was very distracted watching it. Which is nothing to say about the movie. Like, the movie is brilliantly made, every department is amazing, but I don't know, maybe I've outgrown it. And I was reflecting on that. I think it's because my entry to the movie was so deep and rich to begin with, that it was only going to be downhill from there on out. So I'm glad I watched it again. Am I ever going to watch it again in my life? Probably not, which is a sad thing to say, because I do like this movie, but it's just how my relationship with this movie has unfolded over 25 years or however much time has gone.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I definitely would recommend if it does show up in theaters again at some point. Because
Yes.
that was the moment that for me, because I saw it as a kid and remember being one of the first movies that kind of like disappointed me, I guess, in some way. But it could be, again, my age at that time and having just absolutely loved like the string of, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, not Pocahontas, Beauty and the Beast. Like, those were like some of my favorite movies, and this one I thought was a step down. But definitely when I saw it in IMAX, so I would definitely recommend that. But it's interesting you bring up that memeified thing too. I mean, I struggle with that for sure. With some movies, it just are so much a part of the culture. It's sometimes hard to just have the art like stand on its own and detach it, like release yourself from the cultural impact of it or the way the culture has absorbed it, and just look at the art on its own. And I think there's a lot of movies, that I've come across that have, already been interned into the culture before I'd seen it. And it's hard for me then to, detach from that. So I definitely get what you're saying about, like, it's such a still a part of, American culture, at least, that it's hard to separate that from just the movie on its own. Which, again, I think I entered into it sort of the opposite. Like, the expectations were so high because it was, Disney animation, they had just done Aladdin, what's going to be next here? And then being kind of disappointed from that, that it allowed me to just create that distance, that then I kind of came back to it when I saw it in IMAX. And then again, never really thought about these themes. I mean, good for you as a kid, having that be, I was more, thinking about Simba and like, Hakuna Matata and let's sort of mess around and stuff. It wasn't really the father-son dynamic, never really resonated, or didn't really think about it because I was, I guess, young and just focused on other things. But that's, that is interesting that, you hadn't seen it actually in so long. It's always interesting too, coming back to those films. Especially because it's still around in the culture,
Totally. I think we've established this on this podcast that I was a weird child in many ways.
I don't think that's weird. It's, movies can hit people differently at different times. It's all about context,
No, I was just a heady kind of kid. I don't remember being a kid running around and doing silly things ever, actually. I don't think I had that period, which is, whatever, good or bad.
Yeah, right. So this movie like a big phenomenon in India when it came out too? Because it was like, you couldn't get around it, It's the same similar thing.
It was huge. I mean, then you were saying like it's part of the culture, like it's not just American culture, it's like global culture. And, kudos to the movie. How many movies have made it in that,
True.
This is like Titanic, and it's in that league of movies that are sort of known and appreciated across the entire globe. So, kudos to them for that. So
Yeah. Which at the time I just didn't understand. And I think now, especially through this lens that I just was talking about, I think it's because that there are these universal themes of fathers and sons, and those transcend all cultures,
totally,
for sure. So then I was like, okay, well, now I get why this one popped harder than maybe like a Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin or Little Mermaid, even though I personally think those films are much stronger than this one.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
On to your number two.
Turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is your number two?
All right. So my number two is a little movie called Superman from 1978. Quick logline is: an alien orphan is sent from his dying planet to Earth, where he grows up to become his adoptive home's first and greatest superhero. Directed by Richard Donner, obviously starring Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, Marlon Brando, Margot Kidder. So, yeah, this movie has like multiple levels of resonance for me. First of all, I just had this memory of my dad talking about Superman, watching this with my mom on in some like open air theater,
Oh, cool.
and he would sort of say they both would talk about watching Christopher Reeves fly over the screen with his steely blue eyes. It was sort of like a kind of a breathtaking moment for them
Mm.
when this movie came out, and I think it was a part of probably them. This is the time when I think they had just met,
Oh,
and so
cool.
they were probably going out on dates and such, and all. So it's right at that time. And I think even though my dad was in the army, he secretly always wanted to be in the navy and wanted to fly planes, and he's always had this fascination with flying and watching this man who's kind of perfect and is a symbol of all things good,
Hmm.
be look so good and then fly like that. I think I can't even put it in words, but I always felt this sense of magnetism that Superman had on my father.
Mm.
And through him, I've had that too. Superman is probably my favorite superhero, even though I'm not a superhero person, but
Hmm.
I had a Superman outfit as a kid. I wore it at my fifth birthday and such.
Nice.
It was the only outfit of that kind I've ever had in my entire life. Um, so this meant something to me because it almost felt like this is like a shared thing that me and my dad have. And for a second, I can almost see my dad as like a little boy in a way, which
Mm.
is like a very interesting experience to see. But then as I've grown older and watched the movie several times, this is of course Superman's story and such, but I think it's also so much of his two dads stories,
Hmm.
and it's moved me so much to just watch both dads, Jor-El and Papa Kent, kind of just be two really strong dads, but also very different fathers, right?
Hmm.
Jor-El is all about everything we've been saying with Mufasa and such, and even Atticus Finch, the symbol of do the right thing, responsibility, but also there's a lot of tenderness and love in there. The scene of him putting little baby Superman in the little capsule, sending him away, still moves me because the
Hmm.
way he holds his child and kisses him goodbye. You don't see very overt expressions of physical love between fathers and sons displayed on screen very often, and my dad was always like that with us. We got lots of kisses and hugs
Yep.
and such. We
Yeah, me too.
still get, even though I'm old, we still get those, and
Yeah.
it was a big part of my growing up. So you see that, and then the kind of relevance Jor-El has as Superman is, figuring out who he is and coming into his own, the place that he goes to have these conversations with his father about what's right, what's wrong, who should I be? Should I let people know about my power? Should I abuse my powers a little bit or show off or not? All of that conversation is so critical. And I admit as kind of the chats I had with my dad and sort of growing up and figuring out what's right, what's wrong. But then on the other hand, you have Papa Kent, who also loves him like a son, of course, and has a
Right.
lot of tenderness and affection. But at the same time, to me, it represents how fathers also have to let go their kids, because Papa Kent always knows that this child is made for something much bigger. He'll always be bigger than just my own son. And I think I've seen my dad kind of transition between the two as I've grown older, of
Hmm.
being the protective, guiding light father, but also letting go and make me the choices that I want to make, but also support me. And every now and then I see the two fathers cross over in my dad, and sometimes I have to sort of tell him, nope, nope, I got this. But it's such a, as I've grown older, this movie has meant so much more just from the two fathers lenses. But that aside, this is probably not, this is before all the superhero mania that we live in now, but this is sort of like an epic movie.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is like a
Huge.
Lawrence of Arabia style movie, really.
Hmm.
But it's so character driven. It's epic, but also so lighthearted. You really see the magicalness of this godlike figure and how insane and wonderful and silly that would be if this person was amongst us,
Right.
and how tongue-in-cheek that is. The scenes between him and Louis Lane are so funny. It's like the perfect rom-com there could ever be. But then you have, Gene Hackman and his silly people with him. That's so crazy, but also once again so character driven. The special effects are amazing. They
Yeah.
hold up. Like him flying is still magical. I've seen the balcony scene a million times, but it still makes your heart flutter, when you see that again. Even the Krypton scenes, they're probably not so amazing, but I think they make sense to me. Like whatever special effects they have, they make sense to me. And great score by John Williams,
Oh,
probably
fantastic.
my favorite of his.
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
amazing.
and then I say this often, like this movie, it lets you be in the breadth of the characters. It's not jump cuts all over the place. It's not, heightened things for the, to kind of tell you that, oh, stuff is happening. No, you just be with the people and, you let them wash over you, even though it's like a epic movie with, freaking superheroes, but that's the key to it. It feels real. The
Hmm.
stakes feel real because you're with the people and you care. Unlike, I'm not a superhero person, so people will hate me for this. I mostly don't care.
Hmm.
It's because of that. So I don't know. It's such a brilliant movie, insanely rewatchable. So yeah, that's my number two, Superman.
Yeah, this is a great film. I mean, for all the reasons you said, I think Richard Donner just did a fantastic
Yeah,
job of capturing the essence of the character, making the movie feel epic, but also special and magical. And it's still all, a lot of it, to John Williams' credit, is due to the score, which is, again, that Superman theme is for sure one of
yeah.
the best themes he's ever written, easily. And yeah, this is a film I watched a lot as a kid on VHS, and was one of my favorite movies. I think actually I've grown to appreciate it more as I've gotten older, especially because, as you mentioned, this film was really the first, major superhero film that Hollywood had made, treated with a respect or reverence to the character
Mm-hmm.
as, okay, well, this Superman is a major part of American culture and we should treat it in a special way. Even that amazing opening montage where you see like the comic book, and it, like, there's like a
Yeah,
theater and the comic book sort of opens up and it's like, we're taking you into this very special world.
yeah.
And it held it with some respect. And I think that is what made this movie so key and so like timeless, for sure. And I think, it's a brilliant pick too for the fathers thing. You're definitely right. This movie is about the two different fathers. I actually view them a little bit differently than what you were saying. Like, I was taking this as like Jor-El was the more stricter, this is what you need to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. I have expectations that you have to hit. You need to live up to this thing. But it was very much like a more strict kind of parent, and a distant one too. Like, he never really knew
Mhm.
Jor-El. It was only through these recordings. It was literally only like, I'm going to teach you lessons. I'm not really showing you love. I mean, obviously, yes, you're right. In the opening, he did, but Clark didn't experience that, or Kal-El didn't. And then you have Pa Kent, who's giving him that like love and basically telling him like, oh, you can do great things, but not necessarily telling him what to do. Teaching
Right.
him the ethics, and it's a lot more about empathy and what humanity means. And that's like the second part of a dad. It's like the stricter dad versus the more loving, not necessarily that the strict dad also loves his kid, but the way that he was a father was much more focused on emotion, feeling, and empathy. Then there's that critical scene at the end of the film when now that he's Superman and Lois Lane has just died, and he's very upset and mad and just needs to decide what he's going to do. And he flies up into the clouds and he hears basically like both of his fathers, Jor-El is saying, you
Yeah.
can't mess with human events. Like, you can't do anything. She died. Like, forget about it. And then you hear Pa Kent being like, oh, you're here to help people. You must, you're here to protect the people and love the people. And then Clark makes a decision that is in a way combine both of his fathers together.
Mhm.
But he's his own man. And I think that's really when he becomes,
Mhm.
replaces both of his fathers and decides he's going to break the laws of time or physics or whatever, reverse time by flying around the world to save Lois, because he has that empathy for humanity. Like, he's not He's not just a distant, Kryptonian. Like, he's part of them, and he has those human emotions too. So I think that is the moment when, like, he, replaces both of his fathers and becomes Superman. But yeah, there's so much of this movie is basically about that. Both of these fathers, how Clark deals with them, and how they instill in him and create, both of those methods of parenting or being a father made him into the Superman he is today. He couldn't be Superman without Jor-El. He couldn't be Superman without Pa Kent. It's like he's taking both of those and then, but at the same time, throwing them both off and making his own decisions. It's just a fantastic movie to talk about in this context of fathers and sons. I mean, I think it's one of the best screen version of that for sure. And the Superman mythos really lends itself well to that. But I think because Donner focused so heavily on those aspects, it makes this film more successful than the other film versions of Superman that we've seen that aren't struggling with those things so much. I feel, at least. And that's why this movie is the best version of Superman that I think has been on screen so far. And I think that's the credit to Donner and the screenwriters recognizing these themes of fathers and sons.
Totally. And that's sort of the inner turmoil, right? Because I often hear and read that, what's the struggle that Superman has? What's the weight that he's carrying, the way Batman does and such. But I think that is his weight. And like you said, that's what the movie focuses on. No, I agree with you. I think Jor-El is definitely sort of the more kind of righteous dad. I just don't I wouldn't use the word strict in that sense. But absolutely, yeah, he's definitely portraying more of that side of, this is what you should be doing, and I'm here to teach you, and here are my lessons and such. But I don't know, I just never forget that kiss in the beginning and how he lets him go, that I always feel like that even though these are lessons, they are not coming with a stick,
For sure.
Is love there is sort of like, yep, you have to be your own man, you have to figure it out. But yeah, it's really the two fathers that combined together sort of make the perfect father, if there is such a thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And in a way, maybe this movie's saying there isn't, because you need two different dads and with two different sort of styles to create, the literal perfect person, which is Superman. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And who is, the perfect person in many ways.
Exactly. No, he does. I mean, at the end of the movie, I think that's what he becomes. I mean, he has that burden that he carries with him of expectations from both of his fathers. And when he's able to understand that and kind of throw that off and make his own decision, that's when he really saves, the woman he loves, and then, the planet as well, because he puts California back together after it gets cut into the sea for Gene Hackman's wild real estate scam plotline. I think that, the movie is fantastic. I love too how it's very clearly like three different acts, like Krypton, Smallville, and then Metropolis. I think just Donner does a great job there, though. I mean, at the end, I think once the plot gets going too much with Gene Hackman, it turns into a little bit silly, but still a fantastic film.
I lose interest there, but it's certainly better than CGI demon third act.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just a great film.
Yeah. All right, number one.
So number one for me is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade from 1989. This film's directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Harrison Ford, Sean Connery, Julian Glover, Allison Doody, and River Phoenix. The plot line from IMDb: in 1938, after his father, Professor Henry Jones Sr., goes missing while pursuing the Holy Grail, Professor Henry Indiana Jones Jr. finds himself up against Adolf Hitler's Nazis again to stop them from obtaining its powers. This movie, and why I put it is number one, I think it's one of the better films, at least that resonate with me too, about the relationships between fathers and sons on screen. And it's sort of an encapsulation of a lot of the themes we've already talked about, in terms of, replacing the father, having that strict parent, the loving parent, like all these different things, in terms of that relationship with your father. But the key thing in this film, I think that is really resonated with me, is that relationship changes as you age, more so than mother relationship. I feel is a lot more of like, you love your mom, and your mom sort of helps you return to that safety of being a child, and you feel protected and safe. And a father relationship and that is always, I feel like, what you will have with your mother as you get older. And with your father, I think the roles change in terms of what your father can and should and does do for you in your life as you get older. Even after you replace the father, like Indiana Jones does in this movie, in a sense, there is still a need for your father in your life in some ways. So I think this movie really does show that, there's the MacGuffin in the film, right, is Indy is trying to search for the Holy Grail. Which I think is also a great representation for that father-son relationship. I mean, it's something you're searching for that might not, it is a magical thing that is in a way something you can't attain, but you're trying to, through your entire life, just develop that relationship you have with your father. I mean, the son in this film, Indiana Jones, he basically did follow in his father's footsteps. Like, he's also an archaeologist. He's also, a little afraid of a specific animal. Like, his dad didn't like rats. He doesn't like snakes. There's a lot of parallels there between the two. I mean, he's clearly his father's son, but at the same time is trying to find then his own path. Even though it's a path that, his father was on before him. And I think that's what this movie sort of talks about as the film develops and goes on in terms of the plot of how, he's measured up against his father. He clearly has a chip on his shoulder in a way of like, well, I'll never be like my dad, but it actually, like, he is, he's the one who does find the Grail with the help of his father, though. His father's book, like his father's lessons, taught him how to then be, even a better archaeologist than his father. He was able to accomplish what his father never could in his career. So I think that just definitely exemplifies how the father and son relationships can change over time. Because again, it's like that resonance of those lessons. I think, what also is great is that scene in the film where they have just escaped the Nazis. And there's a nice, really quiet moment where they're on a Zeppelin, they think heading off to freedom before the Nazis realize they're there. And then it's, Indy's like, look, like, we never talked. And he's like, okay, fine. What do you want to talk about? And he's like, I don't know. And it sort of shows that, like, he's like, look, did I ever tell you to, what to do, what to eat, to do your homework? No, I gave you self-reliance. Like, by being a distant father, that was my lesson to you. And I think that scene is important because it helps you understand, that Indy's father, even though he's very distant, and what Indy thought was, cold and maybe he didn't love him, actually was all out of love. And that strict upbringing was, he was trying to teach him these lessons of self-reliance, because to him, that was an important moral value. And I think, it helps you really understand how a father, like, wants to teach their son things, even if the son doesn't realize, what those lessons are at the time, and even might, misinterpret them. You can even look at through this, it's a religious artifact they're looking for, obviously. And in the Christian religion, at least, there's a father and son relationship between, God and Jesus. And I think this film mirrors a lot of those things by using a lot of that, Christian iconography in here. And yeah, at the end of the movie, yes, they find the Grail physically, but they leave it behind, because really what they found, the true Grail in this, is that loving bond that they never really were able to have growing up. Right. And at the end of the movie, they ride off into the sunset together. They've found salvation. Both of them now are the father and son that they had always maybe struggled to be over time. So I think, the older I get, I think this movie just resonates with me more and more, just about, the themes and how your themes of fatherhood, fathers and sons relationships, and how, again, over time, you never really outgrow your father. Even once you do replace them, there are still important journeys that you can go on together and learn to just be better people. Indy's dad also learned how to be a better person through Indy. So it's just, I think, one of the better movies that represents fathers and sons in the same spirit of Superman. But, in this film, they get to both live at the end, instead of, unfortunately for Superman's, both of his dads had to die for him to learn. But at least he was able to learn from Henry. Indy was, which I just think is a great relationship that you get to track over the course of the film.
Yeah. Such a great movie. I had never seen this movie until a few weeks ago, so always wanted to. Well, I lie, actually. I watched Temple of Doom as kind of growing up, and that's the first indie movie that I watched. Okay. And I just didn't like it, which different people might have different opinions about that. So I sort of stayed away from Indiana Jones movies for a long, long time because of that, because I was like, this is just silly.
Yeah.
Of course, knowing that these movies are great, but I was very happy to watch this movie. You couldn't have said it better. The one thing I would point out is that I think this movie also highlights a little bit of that competitive spirit that fathers and sons can have.
Oh,
I
definitely.
certainly felt that with my father, especially right at that point where I was starting to become an adult,
Hmm.
starting to have my own life, maybe knew a little bit more about certain things that he didn't, even though he has way more experience and deeper knowledge. And how do those two things sort of wrestle against each other? And how do you navigate that? And ultimately it's the love and respect that sort of keeps you going. And but like you said, the relationship changes. At some point you have to come into your own as a son, but your father also has to start to see you as, a man,
Right.
and
Right.
sort of let go of you, if you will. And yeah, so I love that aspect, and it's done obviously in a very fun, tongue-in-cheek way, which is amazing. What brilliant casting!
Oh
You
my God.
couldn't
Yeah.
have
Connery's
two
best
better
role.
people.
Honestly, I think he's never been better than in
He's
this
never been
movie.
better, honestly. I
Yeah.
totally agree. Like, this is what he probably should have had an Oscar for,
Oh, agreed.
in my mind. Like, he's
Agreed.
so brilliant. And then the other thing I kept thinking of, like, not to again shit on superhero movies, because I do like him, but and I know those movies are taking several pages from this book,
Hmm.
but this is how you do it. It has all those trappings, but at the core of it, it's about relationships, it's
Hmm.
about brilliant performances. Once again, it's entertaining, but there's breadth and space for characters and relationships to actually develop. And it's just those little things, that it makes me care more,
Hmm.
that this movie sits with me and is not just, feed fodder that I'm now just waiting for the next one to come, and I've already forgotten what the previous one was. That's what they've built without naming names. In my mind, their entire, castle on, versus this movie lives with you because it has something to say. So yeah, I don't know. This is like the perfect blockbuster movie that is smart, entertaining, funny, moving all at the same time, brilliantly done. Um, and I can't wait for, speaking of fathers and sons, I can't wait for Spielberg's uh, autobiographical
Mm.
movie coming out this year,
Hmm.
because you see a lot of that here too. I mean, it's everybody knows that he's had a fraught relationship with his father, and in some ways this movie is probably repairing that a little bit from his adult eyes, perhaps. So I can't wait to see what the Fablemans would be. I'm sure it'll be amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point on Spielberg. I mean, like his filmography. I mean, we talked a couple weeks ago about James Cameron and how, I think so many of his films are about mothers because of something we don't
Mhm.
really know a lot about that, but there's clearly his mother made a lasting impact on him. And for Spielberg, it's fathers. I mean, every
Always about
movie is
dads.
about dads because of the troubles that he had with his father. And it
Yeah.
just is interesting that he then made a movie that had a happy ending with the father-son
Yeah.
relationship. Like, the dad was distant, he was not there, but at the end of the day, Indy did learn to appreciate him, and his dad, like much like you point out too, did learn how to let go.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that competition angle, I think, is a great point you brought up, and I think this movie with the whole him calling him Junior all the time is a way to put him down. Like, oh, you're
Right.
you're you're Henry Jones Jr. This is the Indiana thing, and it's clear. And then you understand. Oh, well, he took on that name because he was trying to step away from the shadow of his father by not having the same name, even though he ended up in the same profession, with with the same, kind of quest to, find all these religious artifacts. Even in this movie, they're with the same woman. So it's like you can't
That part
really.
was very weird, by the way.
I love that scene when the Nazi guy's talking to them, and it's both of them don't know that the other one's been with the same woman, and they're
Yeah.
reacting to it. I think that was so funny. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they don't really. I think this is Spielberg at the height of his powers, arguably maybe one of his better movies in the top three in my mind that he's ever done. And yeah, it's rare that they make movies like this anymore. Where yeah, there's the MacGuffin, and the MacGuffin's fun, and there's a lot of antics and roller coaster ride stuff that is there, but beneath the surface there's a very strong messages and themes that this movie is dealing with throughout fathers and sons, and that's what makes it resonate even to this day and stand up over the test of time. It's not just like the roller coaster rides of the great action scenes, which there
Yeah.
are many that are fantastic, but that's not why you remember the film. In the same way the
No.
Superman, I think, again, that film is timeless because those themes are there, and it's not just about the spectacle, even though the spectacle of him flying is still amazing and still
Yeah.
works today, but it wouldn't be the same if it didn't have that meat behind it, which I think this film
Exactly.
again is perfect encapsulation of father and son's perfect Father's Day movie in my mind.
It's so good. So good. So my number one is a bit of an unusual pick because I feel like a lot of people wouldn't associate this as a father's movie, or maybe they would. It's Sound of Music from 1965. Quick log line: a young novitiate is sent by her convent in 1930s Austria to become a governess to the 7 children of a widowed naval officer. Obviously starring Julie Andrews, Christopher Plummer, Eleanor Parker, directed by Robert Weiss. I mean, I pretty much everybody knows Sound of Music, so I don't think we need to get into that. But
Yeah.
yes, this movie is Maria's movie. It's the kids' movie. It's the movie with the beautiful songs and the nuns and the hills are alive, all of it, which I've loved for my entire life from the beginning of time. But the thing that has always struck me in this movie and my sister, both of us, was Captain Von Trapp. And I think it's something about him in an army uniform or in a uniform being this symbol of duty and honor, but also kind of held back on emotions and held back on showing love to his kids. But then he finds his way to kind of get to that place that he probably was at a certain point in his life. And we would bawl, my sister and I mean, who are we kidding? Me more so than her. When Edelweiss would come up and Christopher Plummer would come and sing that song, I still get kind of teary-eyed even just thinking about it, because it always moved me so much right from when I was a little boy, because I saw so much of my father in this character, somebody. And my dad, like I said, was always very loving and a lot more kind of explicit and showy about that, so there was no repressed things. But at the same time, I did view my dad as an army person who was out there doing important things in life. And so whenever he sort of let that guard down, held us and hugged us and spent time with us, and we did silly things or what have you, it was special. It meant something. And I think this is what this character does in this movie. So this is why this is my number one, even though I think in terms of like actual themes, I could put Superman as my number one movie. But from like a pure emotional resonance standpoint, I think Christopher Plummer will always be in this movie an image of my father for till the day I'm here. But aside from that, what can I even say more about Sound of Music that hasn't been said? It'll all be just repeat. But what a great movie, timeless for all the reasons we know. If you haven't watched it, I don't know where you've been. Watch it. That's all I would say.
Yeah, it's funny. Just in the beginning of the episode, we both mentioned that we're singers and we're not going to sing in this episode, and yet we end on one of the best musicals of all time. But we're still not going to sing. So sorry, listeners, that's another one. But yeah, no, this movie is just amazing. I think it actually is a great fit for the father figure in this movie looms very large. I mean, in a way, it's his story arc more than it is like Maria didn't really learn anything or change. She's an agent. She's like the magical nanny that comes in and makes, in the same way Mary Poppins does the same thing for that family, and makes that family understand what love is, especially with the fathers in Mary Poppins too. But it's her coming in and be able to teach the dad more than even the kids, actually, of how to relate to his kids through love, because the dad
and
music, right? It's that music is how he's able to show love. And when he, realizes that, I think that's when he's able to open up and not be so much of a strict father. I mean, I think was using, because of his military background, he treated his kids like soldiers, and that's how he was showing affection. It's like, you need discipline, you need to do this, blah, blah, blah. And that's what I'm supposed to do as a father, because he did love the kids for sure. But then when Maria comes in and he realizes, oh, they have this amazing talent of song, and like, I like to sing and I like to hear them sing. And then he's able to open up and be more emotionally available. And then, at the end of the movie, he's even able to, in a way, has to choose between being a soldier, being a father, because as a soldier, he should stay and, work with the Nazis who have now taken over. And that's his duty as a soldier. He has to serve his country, even though, yes, the Nazis are now in charge, but still his duties as a soldier would be to support the Nazis then. But instead, he's like, no, I will go against the soldier part of myself and leave and to protect my family because I'm a father first and not a soldier first. And I think that's what Maria helps him learn over the course of the film, that he knew all along. And again, that he loved his kids and things like that. And obviously he had to deal with his wife being passing away and all that kind of stuff.
That's what shut him.
Exactly. That's what shut him down. And he viewed his role only as the protector and not as the loving father, but then eventually, you know, was able to show that. So I think in a way, his arc is what makes this, is what drives the narrative forward of this film, more than, you know, the kids have their own little arcs. And like, obviously Maria is struggling with some things too, but it really is, you know, Chris Plummer's movie. And I think he does a fantastic job in it. I mean, again, what's there to say about Sound of Music other than one of the most amazing musicals? It's still just the way this movie was shot. It's just breathtakingly like giant is the only way you can describe it. And
Epic.
It takes these songs. I mean, the whole like the do re mi sequence, which goes on for a couple sort of like verses, is one of like the most amazing on film music performances I have ever seen. I mean, talk about taking a stage play and making you forget it was ever in a theater.
Oh,
like
gosh.
This movie, it's like you see this and you're like, how could this ever be in a, versus some movies you see, it's like, okay, I get it. They basically just shot the stage musical or whatever. Fine. I could see this in a theater and get the same effect. You cannot get this effect in a theater, as great as that Rodgers and Hammerstein musical is, which is good. And the songs are great. But what Wise was able to do is just elevate the songs on such an epic scale that is just absolutely breathtaking. It's just like, there's some shots in this movie, it just like, it takes your breath away and then you throw incredible music on it too. And you're just sort of like in awe of this film. Can't say anything else other than this is one of the greatest musicals and movies ever made. And I think it's a great example also of a father on screen. So I'm glad you put it in here. It's always enjoyable to watch Sound of Music, but especially with the focus on the father arc. Just fantastic film.
It's funny. Both of our number ones have some Nazi connection with fathers standing up against Nazis. What have you?
Oh, that's true. Actually, I don't know what that means, but maybe it means something.
Who knows? You know, this movie is just epic and probably kind of yearly viewing for me at this point. It has been for, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 years really. So it's
interesting. This movie for me is kind of like Lion King for you in the sense of like, I saw it a little bit as a kid and liked it, but it wasn't like, there were other musicals in my household that we come back to a lot more often, movie musicals. And this for some reason wasn't really one of them. Maybe it's like my parents weren't as into it as some other ones. And I'd always liked it. And then it's really been as an adult and watching it and being able to appreciate just this, again, the cinematic power at play here, what they were able to do, then I'm like, wow, like this movie just is elevated on a whole other level as a musical other than some of the other things that have been. So I've actually seen this movie very often in my life. Like it's probably less than 5 times in total. But every time I see it, it just like becomes better and better and better. I can appreciate it just so much more for what they're able to do. It's amazing. It's an amazing film.
Pretty amazing. All right. So I guess we're done with our list. Were there any movies that didn't make it for you?
Yeah, there were some. Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet from '96, Tim Burton's Big Fish, a couple Marvel films in there, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which I think does a great job of balancing both of the themes and the action, much like Last Crusade, Thor, Return of the Jedi, and then Father of the Bride, the Steve Martin version from '91. But we talked about Steve already in this episode, so
yeah, I had Father of the Bride on my list too.
Great film, yeah.
And actually, you mentioned it, Mary Poppins as well. I think that's definitely a very similar kind of tagline or pathway. Even another Steve Martin movie, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I think that's another one which is definitely a great dad movie. So
I think that's his best performance, honestly.
I would
maybe we'll talk about that in an episode in the future. But yeah, I love Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's just fantastic.
It'll probably come up one day for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Great. So yeah, that's our episode on fathers. Hopefully all the dads out there appreciated the films we talked about, and then the sons and daughters as well. Maybe there's some movies on that we discuss you want to throw on Father's Day to watch with your dad. And this was a great discussion, Karan. I really enjoyed talking about these things.
Likewise. And that's a great point, actually. All these movies are very watchable. Like I have actually watched all these movies with my father, at least the ones on my list. And that's why they're probably on my list too. Because I've seen them with him, many, many times. So yeah, all of these would be great fun watches with your dads. So highly recommend those. And as always, please subscribe or review us. We love hearing that. We love hearing feedback and comments. So please keep doing that. So thank you for that.
Great. Well, I'll talk to you later, Karan.
Bye.